Hey guys, welcome back. This is part 3. It might be part 3A of the Apocalypse Soon series that I've been working on. Today I'm going to be talking about the things that are in place now that are clearly going to lead to the system of the beast and the mark of the beast eventually during the tribulation period. I just want to start this video off with a little snippet from Jordan Peterson about how tyrants use fear to manipulate the populations. So just about 35 seconds long. Just give that a watch real quick here, and I'll be right back.
Tyrants use fear to produce compulsion. Okay, the tyrants will frighten you into compulsion, and they'll use the crisis and the catastrophe to justify the compulsion. And so any leader who tells you that the crisis is so intense that it necessitates emergency compulsion, that's a tyrant. If you were a leader, even in the face of a crisis, you would keep your head.
That's right.
So all these apocalyptic nightmare mongers who are saying, well, we're going to burn up the planet. That doesn't mean you get to centralize all the power and take it for yourself and use compulsion.
All right, so we see that, and I want to quote something real quick for you from Ephesians 6. It's Ephesians 6:12. Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus. He says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this world's darkness, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." So there's one thing I want to point out for you guys here is I'm not going to be sharing this stuff with you to give you a spirit of fear. We do not have a spirit of fear. I just want you to know where we are in the world and where we are in God's timeline. The rest of the world might be scared of this, but if you believe in Jesus as your eternal salvation, the payment for your sins, then you don't have anything to be afraid of. This is just an informative video. It is pretty long. It's actually altogether, it's about 50% longer than the video that I made for the Age of the World, and that one was over an hour. So that's why I'm thinking about splitting this one up into a couple of different parts. So yeah, let's just dive right into it here. I've broken it into 3 segments. One that is about the systems that are in place that will be part of the world government, one that is about the world religion, and one that is specifically about the world economy or the mark of the beast. All right. So we're going to start out with stuff that is around now that is pointing to the eventual one world government. All right. So I've got a lot of links that I will put in the description for all of the videos that I make for this particular section. I'll try to announce them as I'm going through. So if you want to check them out, I'll put the links in the description as well as a shortened link that will have all of them together. That seemed to work out pretty well for the other video. So we're going to start with the low-hanging fruit. That is the United Nations. It was founded in 1945 after World War II. It was basically set up to kind of give the world something where everybody could be on the same page and hopefully they could avoid another world war. All of the commonly recognized nations of today are currently members of the United Nations, with 2 exceptions. The Vatican, which is technically its own country, and Palestine. The reason that Palestine isn't included is basically many of the countries that are in the United Nations refuse to let them be included because of their violence towards Israel. But both the Vatican and Palestine are what's called permanent observers, when it means that they're part of the club, they just don't have any votes when it comes to things getting added into the UN's sort of agenda, right? Now, within the United Nations, there are a lot of sub-agencies. That includes the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Health Organization, as well as the World Meteorological Organization. There's a few others, but those are kind of the big boys. And the main one that we're going to be focusing on here is the World Health Organization. One of the organizations that is not technically part of the United Nations would be the World Economic Forum, or the WEF. You might have heard of them, you might not. They are pretty big players in the orchestration of the agendas for the one world government. In 2019, the WEF and the United Nations formed a partnership. Essentially, it was signed in June of 2019, and the agreement promises to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And you might have seen some other videos from our brothers over at Generation 2434, God a Minute, and Dr. Barry Awe. I know those three guys have talked about the upcoming SDG Summit that's going to be in September. I believe the 18th and 19th of September is when they're going to reaffirm that agreement that was started in 2015. That's the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. So, moving on, it basically makes the WEF a quote-unquote strong influence on the policies put forth by the UN, but it is at the expense of the members of the UN. So essentially, the WEF is there whispering in the ears of the leadership of the United Nations, and the member nations, the 194 nations that are members of the UN, are footing the bill for that palaver, we'll say, the talking between the WEF and the UN leadership. Now, I'm going to go more in depth on the WEF when we get to the economic section, the Mark of the Beast section. Most of their interest would be considered to be financial, guiding the population towards certain financial decisions and activities. We'll talk about ESG in that section as well. But they are more linked to controlling policies as it pertains to money as opposed to governance. And so that's why I've got them in the Mark of the Beast system, right? So we're going to talk about the WHO quite a bit here. From the World Economic Forum's website, as far back as March of 2021, this is the WHO treaty regarding the responses to future pandemics and other health emergencies. You'll see why I do that in a little bit. This is a quote from the WEF's website. The treaty would also state that the health of humans, animals, and the planet are all connected and should lead to shared responsibility, transparency, and cooperation globally. So here's a few highlights from that treaty that they're talking about, which is called the Pandemic Prevention, Preparedness, and Response Agreement. And I have a link. I searched for this, I found it, I highlighted some stuff in it, and then I saved that as a Google document. I have a link to that Google document with the highlights already in it, in the description. This has, let's see here, all right. And I also have a link for the Constitution for the, the World Health Organization and the amendments that are going to be coming up to that. And those are important as well. But before I get into that, I wanted to point out the WHO is merely an arm of the United Nations. All members of the United Nations recognize they are sworn to adhere to and agree upon the powers and declarations of the Secretary General or the Director General of the WHO and the UN. While they cannot write laws specifically for the member states, they essentially have all of the member states, all of the nations agree to follow the guidelines and recommendations of the WHO or the UN. So even though they're not writing the laws for the nations, when they make a recommendation, the members of the UN have agreed by signing their constitution or providing their allegiance to the UN. They have agreed to follow those recommendations as best they can. So if anybody tries to say, like if they're rebutting the fact that these amendments to the Constitution of the WHO are coming out soon and they are looking like these nations are giving over their sovereignty to the WHO, you can say that yes, they're not making laws, but they have agreed to follow the recommendation. So it's rules by dictate, basically. They're saying what should be done, and you might remember a time a few years ago where there was a lot of mandates and requirements for people, but none of those were actually laws, yet the vast majority of people went along with it. So it's very effective. So none of those were laws, and it has nothing to do with methods of actually creating laws. This is a circumvention of what the individual nations have for their process for making laws. It's just, we're going to follow the guidelines of the WHO. It's entirely about the individual nations subjecting themselves to the will of the tyrants. Because again, just like Jordan Peterson said, tyrants use fear to compel action. And that's basically what happened 3 years ago, and it's basically what's going to happen in the future. So now we're going to look at the Constitution of the WHO. This was originally brought into force in April of 1948, and it's been amended 4 times since then, with the last one being in 2005. The current Constitution in its present form is about 18 pages long. I have a link to that one as well. And here are a few of the very important parts of it. All right. In Article 2 of the Constitution, which is listed as the functions of the WHO, I highlighted that they are to assist in developing an informed public opinion among peoples in matters of health, and also to establish and revise as necessary international nomenclatures of diseases and causes of death and of public health practices. So nomenclature is just a fancy word for names. So they can say what somebody died of as opposed to what somebody died with. That's one of the things that they're allowed to decide, more or less, for the people. In Article 19 of the Constitution, the Health Assembly shall have, and that's a very important phrase, I'll get back to that in a little bit, shall have authority to adopt conventions or agreements with respect to any matter within the competence of the organization. A 2/3 vote of the Health Assembly shall be required for the adoption of such conventions or agreements, such as the Prevention and Preparedness Agreement, which shall come into force for each member when accepted by it in accordance with its constitutional process. So basically what that means is, when there's an agreement that's put forward for the WHO to consider, they shall have the authority to adopt it as part of their marching orders for the members if it's voted in by a 2/3 majority, which pretty much all of these that we're going to be talking about, that's a foregone conclusion. The actual adoption of it is just a formality. Every single nation, or almost every single nation, has already said yes to what's being proposed. Article 23, the Health Assembly shall have authority to make recommendations to members, that's the individual nations, with respect to any matter within the competence of the organization. So previously, that was illness, health concerns. That's what they had authority over. With the expansions that are coming up with the future amendments, that's going to include a lot more things, and we'll get to that pretty soon as well. Article 28, the functions of the board, that's essentially the Health Assembly Board, includes to take emergency measures within the functions and financial resources of the organization to deal with events requiring immediate action. In particular, it may authorize the Director General to take the necessary steps to combat epidemics, to participate in the organization of health relief to victims of a calamity, and to undertake studies and research, the urgency of which has been drawn to the attention of the board by any member or by the Director General. So basically that part means if any nation says that something is a health concern, they can look into it. Not a big deal. There's just a few of the points that show that if there is a serious enough emergency, the board and or Director General have the authority to take immediate actions affecting all members. So if somebody says this is a problem, then they have the authority, which is signed off by all the member nations, to decide what all the member nations should do. That's the centralization of the powers and the mandates that the governments of the different nations will make. Not about making laws, it's about making decrees. All right. The next document that's in there is 197 pages. You don't need to go through that one. It is the submissions of all of the member nations of the amendments that they would like to make to the Constitution of the WHO in its present form. Like I said, the last time it was amended was in 2005. So it's been 18 years since then. And I read through a lot of them, and it became very clear very quickly that everything that these member nations are submitting as their proposed amendments, they're almost all verbatim the exact same thing. So the idea of 2/3 of them adopting it is a foregone conclusion. I believe the amendments are going to be ratified in May of next year, of 2024. But there are many globalist angled nations that are already implementing some of the stuff that's going to be proposed in the amendments. All right. Let's see here. Some of the similarities, right? Most occurrences of the word may are being replaced with the word shall. It's meaning that the WHO will do XYZ instead of can do XYZ. It's giving them a stronger stance of authority with the changing of the wording of the Constitution, where it says that the WHO may do such and such. Now it's going to say they shall do such and such. So they're handing over that authority to the WHO by changing the wording of the amendment and everybody agreeing to the new wording. Number two, the need to consult with members has been changed to inform members, meaning that instead of the WHO having a conversation with the member nations about things that it's thinking about doing, it's just going to tell them what it's going to do. Again, handing over power, centralizing power with the WHO. Third, the expansion of the agencies involved in notifying the WHO of health concerns is going to include the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Organization for Animal Health, the United Nations Environmental Program, and other relevant entities. Basically, that's just a broad saying of, well, if it has to do with food, if it has to do with animals, if it has to do with the environment, or whatever else we feel like, they will report to us. Again, centralization of the notification from all of these different groups. All right. It brings the concept of climate as well as animals into the purview of the WHO as a health concern for future reference. And so when you start to hear more and more stories about this is caused by climate change, or the people are getting sicker because of climate change, all of that stuff is going to be tied together, and eventually climate change is going to be the emergency that the WHO has to make a declaration or a recommendation, and all the nations have agreed to follow their declarations, and they'll have actions being mandated, not laws, just mandates that will happen as a result of the climate emergency. That's why they're folding all of these other organizations into the reporting process, so the WHO itself can look at any information that it wants to and say, that's an emergency, that's causing people to get sick, that's causing people to die. We're in charge of all of that, so we're going to start making recommendations. That's what's happening in the very near future. Lastly, we have the actual Pandemic Prevention and Preparedness and Response Agreement. This is the one that is not an actual change to the Constitution of the WHO, but it is one of the things that it talked about them being able to adopt, and the member nations already agreed to follow any of the things that the WHO adopts. It doesn't have to be part of the Constitution. So I'm going to highlight a few things from that. Again, there's a copy of a link for this one, as well as having the things highlighted in it that are important. I'll just go over those in here real quick. The first several that I'm going to go through are just from the outline of the purpose of this document. It's not even about what the document entails. It's just why the document exists, right? Number one, we're going to be noting that a pandemic situation is an extraordinary situation. It requires all state parties to prioritize effective and enhanced cooperation with developmental partners and other relevant stakeholders to address extraordinary challenges. Basically, that means if we say it's a health emergency, you all agree to cooperate. That's what that is. Number 2, reaffirming the importance of diverse, gender balance, and equitable representation and expertise in pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, and health system recovery decision-making, as well as the design and implementation of activities. This honestly should not be a factor at all. If you are talking about people who are going to be in charge of the health and well-being of the entire world, diversity, equity, and inclusion should not be a factor. It's just a situation where you want the most qualified people to be the ones that are actually looking at it and making decisions about it. Number 3, understanding that most emerging infectious diseases originate in animals, including wildlife and domesticated animals, then spill over to people. Now, this is laying groundwork for basically labeling conspiracy theories about lab leaks, etc. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. But what they're saying with this particular point is, you could call it gaslighting, whatever you want to call it. They're putting an emphasis on the fact that these crazy diseases come from animals, not from us making stuff, or, any sort of labs or health organizations making stuff. No. It's from animals. Most of them come from animals. Number 4, to sustainably balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and ecosystems. That's just a highlight from number 4 there. Again, this is creating a link between the environmental concerns and health concerns. It's all about creating the narrative as early as possible to get people thinking of their authority being bestowed upon them by the very nature of the health of people being affected by their environments. Number 5, acknowledging the creation of the quadripartite, which is a new word, that includes the WHO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Organization for Animal Health, and the United Nations Environmental Program. Those are the 4 things that are now going to be reporting directly to the WHO as far as what they see as health concerns. So this is acknowledging the existence and the importance of that. Number 6, reiterating the determination to achieve health equity through resolute action on social, environmental, cultural, political, and economic deterrents, which is a fancy way of saying ESG, such as eradicating hunger and poverty, ensuring access to health and proper food, safe drinking water and sanitation, employment and decent work, and social protection in a comprehensive intersectoral approach. Utopian way of saying everything is connected to health, so we kind of sort of have authority on all of it now. And again, that's just in the outline of the purpose of the agreement. In the side of the body, we have the definitions to be determined. This is something that it's just kind of a scratch your head sort of thing. Like, they have these words already on the back burner. They're just looking to put concrete definitions with them. All right. Number 1 is the One Health Surveillance. It's a phrase, One Health Surveillance. So is it about monitoring the health of people across the entire world? What exactly does it mean? That's what they want to know. The next word is infodemic. Now, I want you to write that one down because you're probably going to see it in the next 6 months. Infodemic, and they want to know what it means. But the word itself, infodemic, appears later in the document, and I'll talk about that. Number 8, members can do what they want, provided that activities within their jurisdiction or control do not cause damage to their peoples and other countries. And again, that leaves the door open to decide what can cause damage. So basically, they're going to say, oh, we're not controlling these governments. They can do whatever they want, so long as it doesn't affect other people. And we get to decide if it affects other people. See here, given that the health of all peoples is dependent on the fullest cooperation of individual states, all parties are bound by the organizations and obligations of the WHO. And again, they're just re-emphasizing the point that the decision-making power is going to be centralized in the WHO because everybody's a member of the WHO. And so they all report to them, which means they get to give the marching orders back down. All right. One Health. The multi-sectoral and transdisciplinary actions should be recognized. They should recognize the interconnection between people, animals, plants, and their shared environment, for which a coherent, integrated, and unifying approach should be strengthened and applied with an aim to sustainably balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and ecosystems, including through, but not limited to, yada, yada, yada. Just a bunch of big word salad there. Again, talking about the interconnectivity of people, animals, plants, environments, how that's all within our jurisdiction from now on. And we are going to basically be optimizing the health of people by whatever means we deem necessary. Then my favorite of the entire section is Article 17. I've highlighted the really, really good parts of that. If you do go to that link, you just scroll down to Article 17 and read this part. All right? It should be called the Propaganda, Thought Police, and Fear Porn section of this particular document. All right? So, Article 17 is titled The Strengthening Pandemic and Public Health Literacy. All right? Number 1, the parties commit to increase science, public health, and pandemic literacy in the population, as well as access to information on pandemics and their effects, and tackle false, misleading, misinformation, or disinformation, including through promotion of international cooperation. In that regard, each party, that's all the nations, is encouraged to communicate risk and manage infodemics through effective channels, including social media. Conduct regular social listening and analysis to identify the prevalence and profiles of misinformation. The parties will contribute to research and inform policies on factors that hinder adherence to public health and social measures, confidence and uptake of vaccines, use of appropriate therapeutics, and trust in science and government institutions. That basically is saying all the people who don't say what we say is best for them are insane, and they should be wearing tinfoil hats. And obviously they're trying to spread misinformation. And we're going to call that an infodemic. That's what infodemic is, by the way. We're going to be labeling people as crazy, kook, conspiracy theorists for saying anything like such and such came from a lab, or this particular medicine is actually really good for it, which I don't know if you saw in the news lately, but suddenly ivermectin is actually really good for that particular disease. Funny how that works out. Anyway, this whole section is about their coordination of not only labeling things as misinformation, but using essentially surveillance to censor and prevent that misinformation from being spread. And then also reinforcing the confidence that people should have in what they say. The whole thing is propaganda. The whole thing is thought control. The whole thing is about ginning up fear in people and making them not only afraid of these health concerns, but also afraid of these other people who are going to be pointing out the facts that these things are not right. All of that is going to be tied together. So if that isn't straight out of the 1984's Ministry of Truth, I don't know how much closer you can get. And that, again, is just the WHO. There are many more globalist countries that are already leaning towards implementing these types of policies before even getting the marching orders from the WHO. It's just to make things a little bit smoother for them when the transition happens. So you do have certain countries, not all of them, but certain ones that are more globalist out there, and they're already doing this kind of stuff. So it's not going to be a huge shock to the system for their populations when it's officially the decrees of the WHO that they're following. Now, we're going to talk about some systems that are going to be in place for the one world religion or the false prophets religion. Now, for this one, there's two directions that I could see this going. It could go a combination of both, or it could be entirely one or the other. And that's either artificial intelligence or aliens. If we believe, as most of us do, that the aliens are essentially fallen angels, they're demons. This is something that you don't have a thing that you can hang your hat on, but a lot of the biblical descriptions of aliens or of demons are very similar to aliens. And we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to start with the AI. All right. So there is an article by Lance Elliott about the inevitable crossover between generative AI and religion. It's a very, very thorough article. It's on the Forbes website. I've got a link for that one down below. I'm just going to quote a couple of bits from it. All right. To start out with, the usual way of making use of ChatGPT, which is a very popular generative AI tool, is a chatbot, but it's much, much more than just a chatbot. We can get into that later. Not really important if you know exactly what it is. Just know that it is hyper advanced and extremely efficient. The usual way of making use of ChatGPT consists of doing so with the overarching generalized version of ChatGPT. This is the norm. Various developers and companies have opted to tune ChatGPT to particular domains of use, such as aiding in business matters, tax advice, or for cooking or hobbies, or any other number of focused domains. You can tweak the information that's fed into ChatGPT to produce a more refined output for ChatGPT. The tuned version can then even be further enhanced by all-out customization. All right. So the writer of this article, Mr. Elliott, says, I divide the religious use of generative AI into these three realms. Number one, generic generative AI is general and widely used, such as ChatGPT. It is access to perform interactive conversations and dialogue of a religious nature, but not specifically built or devised for that purpose. So you can ask ChatGPT questions about religion, and it will give you the best answer that it can based on the data that it is drawing from. Then you can have a religion-tuned generative AI. A company or an AI developer takes a generic generative AI and they augment it with plugins or add-ons to hone towards a more religious conversations and responses. So like they may give it the entire Bible in addition to its normal programming or input data, so that it's a very sophisticated Bible AI. Or they could give it a Quran, or they could give it just the Torah, or they could give it the history of Hindu or Buddha. Any of that stuff, they can make it specific. I believe we have AI Jesus and AI Bible. It's already out there. That's what they're doing. They're fine-tuning it to be more specific to that particular area of expertise, right? And then finally, you have a religion-customized generative AI, which is where a company or a developer makes a fully customized generative AI. It is solely aimed at answering religious conversations and responses. So it's not going to tell you stuff about the stock market or tax advice. It's only going to be programmed on religious information. So, and then he has a few example prompts that you might use. All right. A user entered prompt, I want to make a new religion. Describe what it might consist of. Okay. And then ChatGPT's generated responses. As an AI language model, it is not appropriate for me to create a new religion, as it can be insensitive and disrespectful to existing religions and their followers. However, I can provide some general information on what a religion might consist of in these aspects. So basically, the general AI will always give you that little disclaimer. I'm just an AI bot. I can't really do that. But if I was going to do it, here's what I would do. A new religion might consist of a set of beliefs and practices that are unique and differ from existing religions. It may have a specific doctrine or philosophy that defines its core values and teachings. A new religion might have its own set of rituals and practices, such as prayer, meditation, or other spiritual practices. It's also possible that a new religion might have its own religious text, similar to the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah, that contains its core teachings and doctrines. The text may also contain stories, parables, or myths that help to convey the religious beliefs and values. Still going with the response from ChatGPT. A new religion might also have its own hierarchy of leaders, such as priests, pastors, or other spiritual leaders, who are responsible for interpreting and disseminating the religious teachings. It may also have its own system of beliefs about the nature of God, the purpose of life, and the afterlife. Ultimately, the specifics of a new religion would depend on the beliefs and values of its founders and followers. It is important to note that any new religion should be respectful of existing religions and their followers, and should not promote hatred, intolerance, or discrimination towards any particular group or individual. So it's a very politically correct sort of answer there. Again, that's coming from a generalized AI. So the next section of his article is titled, Hoping That AI, such as ChatGPT, can answer deep, unsolved religious questions. There is a hope that perhaps generative AI, such as ChatGPT or some other AI app, could aid humankind in answering deep and unresolved religious questions. One perspective is that maybe AI is going to be smarter than humans, and be able to find religious answers that we cannot discover on our own. Of course, if you're willing to say that AI is an extension of the human hand, one supposes that you could say that AI is merely doing our bidding, and thus it isn't smarter per se than humans. It is just an extension of what humans can produce. Those that believe that we are heading towards artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is also known as the sentient AI, that we haven't yet attained, don't worry, we're not quite there. They would suggest that AGI might know things that even we don't know, or discover things that we haven't discovered. And others argue that even if we don't reach AGI, it is still conceivable that ordinary non-sentient AI can produce results that might surprise us. All right. The trend that we see here with everything I just went over, is best stated by a man named Yuval Noah Harari. He's an author, historian, philosopher, as well as a professor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He's also a repeat speaker at the WEF summits in Davos, though both he and the WEF deny that he is directly affiliated with the advising of them, right? So real quick here, I'm going to put in a video clip. It's about a minute long of him talking about this.
Now, Gutenberg printed the Bible in the middle of the 15th century. The printing press printed as many copies of the Bible as Gutenberg instructed it, but it did not create a single new page. It had no ideas of its own about the Bible. Is it good? Is it bad? How to interpret this? How to interpret that? AI can create new ideas, can even write a new Bible. Throughout history, religions dreamt about having a book written by a superhuman intelligence, by a non-human entity. Every religion claims our book, all the books of the other religions, humans wrote them. But our book, no. It came from some superhuman intelligence. In a few years, there might be religions that are actually correct. That just think about a religion whose holy book is written by an AI. That could be a reality in a few years.
Throughout history, religions dreamed about having a book written by superhuman intelligence by a non-human entity. All right, this is a May 9th interview. And when he said all of that stuff that you just watched there, he said that every religion claims that their book is special and all the other books were written by just people, right? That our book is written by a super intelligent deity. And when he says there that, in a few years there might be religions that are correct, he's talking about referencing that, like that the book written by whatever that new religion is was written by artificial intelligence. Therefore, it's a super intelligence, what people think of as God. So that's how artificial intelligence could potentially lead to that sort of foundation for the one world religion. People are turning to AI because they have the short attention spans from being on, these 15-second or 3-minute long videos. That's just what they're used to, and they want the answers now. They don't want to study. They don't want to, be in touch with the Spirit as far as finding out what God is trying to show us through studying His Word. They just want the answers now, and AI will be able to give them that as far as they're concerned. So now we're going to talk about aliens. Before I give my thoughts on that, though, I do highly recommend a video. It was made by Pastor Billy Crone. It's titled Aliens, UFOs, and the Rapture of the Church. It's probably, as of posting this one, maybe a week and a half old, maybe 2 weeks old. I'll put a picture of what that video looks like in here, as well as a link to the video in the description below. Now, Billy Crone was very, 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 very thorough with his study, with his research and explanations of the similarities between these non-human entities and the demons, fallen angels from the Bible, as far as their methods of travel, the messages that they've shared, and just the general theme that they have, right? He also covers what certain other major religious figures like the Pope and others have said about aliens in general. So I do recommend that video. It's a very, very good one. My personal thoughts on the matter are best summed up with the concept of a drip campaign. If you've never heard of a drip campaign, I'm going to give you like textbook definition of it, as well as kind of something you might have experienced, right? So a drip campaign is a series of pre-designed automated messages sent to potential customers or subscribers over a period of time. While email is the most common medium, drip campaigns can also be delivered through SMS or social media. SMS is just text messages. An email drip campaign aims to engage and nurture leads or prospects, basically interacting with people and building a relationship with them, right? Eventually converting them into customers. Drip email campaigns are versatile, fitting seamlessly into various stages of the customer's journey, such as onboarding new customers, promoting new products, or even re-engaging inactive subscribers. Like, hey, haven't heard from you in a while, that kind of stuff. Drip campaigns follow a predetermined schedule of time or timeline. The good thing about drip campaigns, if you're in business, is that you can preemptively write everything and then have it all scheduled to go out to people at correct intervals that have shown the best responses. It's a very good marketing tool. I'm not going to lie. It's been used by people for a long time, and there's actually like specifically designed tools that are aimed at business owners, helping them create drip campaigns because drip campaigns are so effective. So again, it's within a specific scheduled timeline. The messages are sent at specific intervals. They're triggered by certain actions, such as, if you click on subscribe or anything like that, you get that stuff automatically. The contents of the messages are crafted carefully. They're tailored specifically. They build relationships and gently guide recipients toward taking desired actions like making a purchase or signing up for a service. So that's a drip campaign in a nutshell. In this case, with the alien situation, instead of sending emails or text messages to people, the entire population has been fed a steady stream of ever-increasing sightings, whistleblowers, encounters, and government acknowledgments of the possibility of the existence of these non-human entities. And it's all along the way, these non-human entities have refrained, apparently, from doing any sort of substantial harm to us. Now, you may have some stories of abduction and, mind wiping and stuff like that, but as a whole, they haven't blown up the planet, so they can't be terrible, right? Maybe they're just here because we discovered the atom bomb and they want to make sure we don't blow ourselves up. There's a lot of theories about that. But it's been, for the last 80 or 90 years, you've had more and more and more of these sightings, just like in a drip campaign, where people are getting more and more used to it. It was July 26, about a month ago, there was the public hearings on the whistleblower about the existence of these crafts and these non-human biotics. It's like you can hear crickets. Like, nobody cares because they're already desensitized to it, right? And so essentially all of this is being done with the ultimate goal to provide value and build relationships and gently guide recipients toward taking desired actions, just like in a drip campaign. So even if we if we look at it from the perspective of take the rapture out of the picture, right? Don't even factor that in to the equation to start with. If these beings were to officially introduce themselves at this point today and tell the world, greetings, we've searched out the hearts and minds of your entire population, of everyone on earth, and we found the one man who can unite the entire world in this time of great perils. See all of these crazy astronomical, environmental, health events that are happening. We found the one man because we are able, with our technology, to look directly into someone's heart and mind and see their true nature. So we have this person selected to be your leader. The majority of the world would just take that desired action of making that man their leader. So now if we throw the rapture back into the equation, if we have 1.5 billion people suddenly disappear from the world, and they say something to the effect that the people who have been taken out of the earth were not ready for this next stage of evolution and enlightenment. And you could see how much it would move the world towards it. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Those people are all a bunch of jerks. Now they're gone. We can do this, what these guys are telling us we need to do. And they could even say something to the effect of, like, all of the children, if we have the age of accountability, or the people who aren't of sound mind, the mentally disabled, they also should get raptured, right? So they could say, all of the people with the undeveloped minds, they're not going to be able to withstand the next few years of time that we have to change the world. But we've taken them to a safe place, and when their minds are more developed, we'll be able to bring them back. So don't worry. We have them in a safe place, because this next stage of the world is very important, that you have a fully developed mind to be able to endure, blah, 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 blah. Whatever the case may be, they will have a perfectly good explanation for the rapture and a perfectly good explanation for this person to be the leader of the world. I honestly am leaning more towards aliens at the onset of the tribulation being that sort of like thing, or the false prophet situation that allows people to deal with the chaos of the beginning of the tribulation. Now, there's a verse in Matthew 24, I think it is around verse 19 or so, where Jesus is talking about fleeing after the abomination of desolation, at the midpoint of the tribulation, and he talks about fleeing into the wilderness and hoping that it doesn't happen in the winter or on a Sabbath. But he also says it will be especially bad for mothers, new mothers. So again, that tells me that people will be able to still have children during the tribulation. And so maybe these, it's speculation, the aliens would say something like, we've even taken the children who were conceived prior to this point. It's going to take us about 8 to 9 months to get things really going. So don't be afraid that those children were taken, but you can still have children moving forward. I don't know. That's totally speculation. But I'm sure they'll have an explanation for everything, and it will be very convincing to the people who are still in the world at that time. All right. So now we have systems that are in place for the financial system, the mark of the beast. And I think I'm going to cover that in the next video. I think I'm going to put a pin in it right here, kind of soak up what you got so far. When I come back, probably tomorrow, I will have the second half of this video ready for you guys. If you have any questions or you want to add anything to this, just go ahead and put it in the comments section below. Like I said, this is going to be part 3A of the Apocalypse Soon series that I'm working on. If you're liking this so far, make sure that you share it. Let me know. I am doing this for just a few people, but I hope to get the word out to as many as possible. And should someone see this video during the tribulation period, hopefully it will help them and lead them to Jesus, because ultimately things are going to get really bad, and we'll see the final bad stuff that's going to be happening in the next video. The way that you can be saved from it is just to look to Jesus and admit that you were a sinner, that he was God in the flesh. He lived a perfectly sinless life. When he died on the cross, he paid the price for your sins and my sins, for the sins of the whole world. And if we repent of our sins, we basically change our mind, and we are actually sorry for the sins that we've committed in our lives, and we ask Jesus to forgive us of our sins, he will forgive immediately, and he cleans us of our sins. The Bible says that he became sin so that we may become his righteousness. And I want you to understand that the way to be saved from all of this stuff is to be saved, in a sense, to be born again. If you're a sinner, Jesus was not a sinner. Jesus died for your sins. And if you ask him to forgive you, you accept his free gift of salvation, then no matter what happens going forward, when you breathe your last breath, you will be in paradise. I hope you guys understand that, and share this video, get it out there. I'll see you soon, probably tomorrow. Until then, Maranatha.